Have a bright mind, but unsure where to shine? Look no further. ANHSCA is here to guide your path to success. Connect with exciting events, discover new opportunities and network with the pros. Unlock your full potential with ANHSCA, where your success story begins. Visit www.anhsca.com and let us be your compass on a journey towards success. Embrace the possibilities and let your brilliance shine with the ANHSCA. Have a bright mind, but unsure where to shine? Look no further. ANHSCA is here to guide your path to success. Connect with exciting events, discover new opportunities and network with the pros. Unlock your full potential with ANHSCA, where your success story begins. Visit www.anhsca.com and let us be your compass on a journey towards success. Embrace the possibilities and let your brilliance shine with the ANHSCA. Have a bright mind, but unsure where to shine? Look no further. ANHSCA is here to guide your path to success. Connect with exciting events, discover new opportunities and network with the pros. Unlock your full potential with ANHSCA, where your success story begins. Visit www.anhsca.com and let us be your compass on a journey towards success. Embrace the possibilities and let your brilliance shine with the ANHSCA.
Hi, good day, everyone. Welcome to our Education Symposium. This is Al Haidt here with ANHSCA, the American National High School Championship Association. Today, I have some great guests with me, and boy, I want you to really tune into what they have to say. And so you guys know the topic of the day. Do you guys remember what the topic of the day is? Check it out on the screen. What's the purpose of education? What is the purpose of education? We want to make sure that you guys are really tuned in and hear what these wonderful guests have to say. So with that being said, let me introduce our guests one by one. And then after I introduce them, I'm going to give them an opportunity to speak briefly about themselves. First of all, we have Mr. Jerome Smith. Jerome, welcome to our show today, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for having me. So, name's Jerome Smith, currently a commercial realtor with Keller Williams Commercial in Fort Lauderdale. But previous to that, I was a college football coach for 14 years. I've coached every level of college football from Division I all the way down to NAIA, and coached and recruited and worked in higher ed for the past 14 years.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Jerome. And Jerome, being very modest, he was with the world, I almost say world champion, but the national champions, Indiana Hoosiers. Woo! All right. So outstanding for Indiana. We're going to give it to them. It's been a long time coming. All right. Next to them, we have Miss D, as we call it, Damaris. Miss D, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, ma'am?
Hello, everybody. I'm Damaris Robinson, and I'm the director of the Early Learning and K-5 Curriculum and Enrichment Program for ANHSCA. And my background is primarily in psychology, particularly developmental psychology, and just working with the underserved youth.
Thank you so much, Damaris. All right, Miss Jackson, Marcy Jackson, ma'am, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm Marcy Jackson. I'm the CEO and Senior Learning Consultant at RESH Institute for Educational Leadership. I'm also the author of Pour the Water, Transformative Solutions for Equity and Justice in Special Education. And I'm an advocate and an administrator of CS, which is Special Education Excellence for Underserved Students. And I'm happy to be with you all today.
Thank you so much, Miss Jackson. All right, Mr. Jeremy Watson, sir.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jeremy Watson. I'm the founder of the Watson Agency. We help mission-driven businesses connect with the people that they're called to serve. So our mission is really to empower you to achieve yours through systems. So we help businesses grow and scale through systems.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard our guest there. And now, so let's get the show started. We only have 60 minutes here, and we may leave a few minutes for comments and questions that we may answer afterwards, but we got so much to get to. And so I'm going to start off with this first question. Now, just to let you guys know, to the audience, the panelists have no clue of what I'm going to ask them, but all they know is going to be in regards to education. And what's the purpose of education? That's all that they know. So they have no more knowledge than what you have right now about what I'm going to say. But they are expert. Each one of these are very educated and fine-tuned individuals and great Americans. And so with that being said, I'm going to start off with Miss Damaris. Miss D, what is the purpose of education in your opinion?
So the purpose of education, in my opinion, is to offer services. What the purpose is to help the development of children accelerate to their highest potential, despite what environment they may come from.
All right. Thank you, Damari. Thank you very much. Same question, Mr. Jerome Smith. What's the purpose of education?
I think the purpose of education is to develop and learn the skills needed to survive in this world.
All right. Short and to the point. All right. Miss Jackson.
Educate comes from the root word educar, that root of educar. And it means to bring out, so to draw out. And so the purpose of education is to draw out what's already in there and likely put in there by the creator. So our role as educators is to bring it out of the child, what's in there.
All right, to bring him out of the child, Miss Marcy Jackson. All right, Mr. Watson, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the purpose of education really is to create foundational skills for the next generation, so that we can develop independent thinkers, but also to give them the habits and the character to be productive citizens in society.
All right, there you have it, folks. So we have a couple different folks that have different range of what the purpose of education is. What say you out in the public? What do you say that the purpose of education is, right? So with that being said, we're going to follow down a little bit further in that line. We're going to work, I say, backwards this time. Mr. Watson, okay, so I heard what you just said about the purpose of education. How do we go about doing it?
I think creating systems and institutions that are predictable, that are compassionate, that can impact the greater good, to kind of facilitate, to be the mechanism to teach the next generation what we would call schools, and properly incentivizing those teachers, properly incentivizing the stakeholders in that system to really equip them with the tools that they need and the resources that they need to provide the information to the next generation. Yeah.
Miss Jackson, how do we go about doing that? You said the educators, the root word is to bring out. How do we do that?
We do that by understanding the individualized needs of each child. And being able to be attentive, to those specific needs, and mapping a plan that works for that individual child. A lot of the education system, as we know it, is sort of a mass design, right? Designed initially to kind of create a group of people that would follow a certain plan, and a certain have a same mindset. Whereas if we think of the initial, root of educating, we're trying to create differences. We're trying to create innovation, innovative thinkers and critical thinkers, and individuals who are able to be independent and self-sufficient. And that requires some individualization of learning.
All right. Thank you, Miss Jackson. All right, Jerome. Same question, sir. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you go about doing it to figure it out. I think providing a service to where it's not just cookie cutter. I think sometimes education gets to be a point where it's all cookie cutter for one size fits all, not understanding that everybody has a different learning style. Everybody has a different pace that they learn. I think if we could find ways where we could specialize learning and make it so that we are teaching applicable things that help people become successful in the world. So, for example, whether it's more homeschooling, or whether it's specialized schooling, or whether it's things that help people really get the skills that they need to be successful in this world, and sometimes not the fluff that's included in education.
Thank you, sir. Miss D, can you tell us a little bit about the same thing? How do we go about doing that?
Well, in my opinion, I think that the current state of education and how we go about it, it needs to have a whole revamp. So I think it's important to allow for children to be outside for much longer than they are, because being outside provides so many ways for them to develop critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, and it accommodates for the individual learning styles of most children. It allows them to get that energy out, allows them to discover new things. And if we want innovators, that's being outside has a lot of, there's no need to create something. It's already there, and that was given to us by our creator.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So now I gave you guys easy questions. Now we're getting ready to get into a little bit more difficult questions. All right, Jerome, we're going to start off with you this time. Is there a difference on how we teach education?
I think that's a great question. Again, I think there is a difference. I think because everybody's different. So as a result, you got to make sure that there's an opportunity to capture those people and the most engage most people. I think I can think a little bit back to my coaching days. I couldn't coach everybody the same way. Some people you could get after them a little bit. Some people you had to, give them a little confidence. Some people you had to put your arm around. Some people need a swift kick in the pants. So you got to be able to adjust your style as the teacher or the educator in order to get the most engagement. And I think is the best way with the material.
Okay, great, great. All right, Miss Jackson, I'm going to ask you this question. I heard what he had to say. Now, if you can answer this. In America, how should we go about teaching education?
That's a broad question.
Yes, it is.
You know, we have to first understand, so the what are we trying to get to? So what are the goals? What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish individuals who can contribute to a society that is functioning, right? Functioning well, with all these tangible and intangible attributes that we want to see, right? All the kindness, all um, the supportive, the collaboration. We want to see those kinds of skills and attributes in our learners. So our teachers need to also be able to display and present those same skill sets, right? Because that's the models. Our children are learning from our models. Before they even get to school, they're learning at home. So the modeling begins with the home community, right? And the neighborhood community, as well as the school community. I would also suggest that while we are definitely looking at universal design for learning as a great example, right? That's sort of the inclusive approach of being able to make sure that we're programming and planning our education for everyone that's in the room, right? You heard Coach Smith. I don't know if I can still call you Coach Smith, but former Coach Smith, talk about how he had to address his different players in different ways, but he didn't isolate anyone, right? He was still kept them all together, and it just required a lot of planning and forethought, consideration of individuality. So I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Okay. Well, I'm giving it up. This is the great thing about the panel. And so what I'm giving is you guys opportunity. You are experts in what you do. You are out in America, in this world here, and people are seeing this. So people get to see this worldwide, by the way. So say hello to the world. They get to see you guys. And so here's the thing. This is your opinion. So this is not a dig one way or the other. It's not the Al Hyde opinion. I'm giving people an opportunity to hear you and what you think of education. We all have different things. I will give my pontification at the end. All right,
Well,
Jeremy.
can I add something else? So I've had the pleasure of observing education in other countries, Germany, Japan, and seeing the classrooms, hands on firsthand, and how that looks. And I will say that one of the things that's really important is being able to recognize that there has to be a system in place. Everyone always complains, sometimes about Montessori and says, there's, just kids are just doing whatever they want to do. There's a system to it, but you have to understand the system and you have to understand the framework. And those systems are getting the results. So look at the processes that have worked and then look at the adults, right? Look at the child's education and outcomes along the continuum. And then go back to where they started. And you'll see that the most effective education have a quality system that is focused on the long-term gains of the child and not just the immediate results of the assessment for that school year, for example. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, thank you for the addition, Miss Jackson. Really appreciate it. Jeremy, here we go. This one is just for you. This one is especially set aside for Jeremy. Jeremy, tell us about this then. If education is important, how should we look for it in the future? If education is really important, how should we look for it in the future?
Yeah, I think the future of education, as I said, once again, has to be collaborative, has to be compassionate. We have to, as Miss D, Mrs. Jackson, Mr. Smith, Coach Smith, all made great points, that everybody doesn't learn the same. I think as opposed to shunning diversity, we need to empower diversity of thought. Everybody isn't a linear learner. Not everybody can sit at a desk and listen to a lecture. Some people learn in sound and colors, and we have geniuses like Kanye West and some of the musical geniuses that are out there that mind works a little bit differently. Doesn't mean that they are unintelligent. It just means that us as educators have to find a way to cater and to deliver to the message to these different type of learners, so to speak. But I think the future of education is really opening our minds up to different possibilities. As you said, Montessori schools, different ways that students can learn. Really, us as the educators opening our mind to that and not saying it just has to be this one way.
Very well. Miss D, let me ask you something on this one here. This one is set aside just for you. If education is so important, let me rephrase it. I was getting ready to go a different way. Because I know you can handle this one here. If education is so important, why do governments don't put all their money towards that for the people? It's a loaded question, I know. And the more we go, by the way, guys, the questions are going to get a little bit more difficult.
So the question was, if education is so important, why are our governments not putting in more money towards the education system?
Absolutely.
In my opinion, I think maybe because they want to create a I really don't know, but it's a need or a desperate need for their services. So to a point where teachers and parents and students have no other choice but to rely on them. So that maybe they're creating a desperate sort of gap of need. Whereas the other side of it is putting in all this money so that all the schools, no matter where they're positioned in the city, are receiving the services needed to educate the children. So it's that question is very messy, I think.
It is. It is a little loaded, as I said.
It is very loaded.
4 minutes, it's going to get more because we're going to dig into this. And so now we're going to get your minds are really working, because this is what the first part that we talked about, people like, okay, but now we're getting into the meat and grind of things there. And so great. I understand what you're saying. You're like, it's a little difficult to understand why wouldn't the government put all their money into education then and some of these other things. So I get it. And I understand your answer. And we'll come back to it a little bit later. Miss Jackson, who's responsible for educating the kids?
Oh, that's my favorite. So the concept of educational leadership for parents is something that I sort of did some research and developed that message about 10 years ago, because the child's first teacher is who? Is the parent. And so the responsibility, honestly, lies with the parent to identify the appropriate resources to cultivate the child that they've been blessed to nurture and develop into adulthood. Now, that means that organization and curation of resources need to be accessible to that parent. Here go, you start running into issues, right? Because some resources are more accessible to some parents than others. And so then you start to have now the differences in the haves and who can access this type of school versus that kind of school. And so you have some that'll go to private school, some that'll go to public school, some that can fill out the forms and some who can't fill out the forms to apply to charter schools, for example. Or so all of those differences and societal impacts then impact the parent's ability to be able to do their job, right? And then all of a sudden it looks like, oh, the parent didn't do what they were supposed to do. When in actuality, these systems that are set in place aren't always accessible to every parent. And so I think, so one, it doesn't abdicate our responsibility as parents to do it. We just have to then all of a sudden find ourselves to be more resourceful. And so a lot of my work is about being an example for parents and helping to curate resources that make it accessible for them to do what it is that they ultimately want to do. Every parent wants to make their child the best they can be. And so we need to make sure that we make educational, social, and health resources more accessible to all parents.
All right. So, Ms. Jackson, if I heard you right, you said the parent is ultimately responsible for teaching the kid. Is that what I heard at the end?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
All right.
yeah. Okay. I mean,
Okay. Good. Good. I just wanted to make sure.
and that doesn't
Now I'm
mean,
gonna get.
but
I'm
let me
gonna.
say this, that doesn't mean, and then sometimes people, that doesn't mean that I have to homeschool my child. That
No.
means that I have to access the resources. I have to navigate the systems that are in place to access those resources, and those resources need to
But
be
in the end,
accessible
you
to me.
still say it's the parent is
Yes.
responsible for getting that
Mhm.
child one. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Smith, what role does the government play in education?
I think the government has a responsibility to fund it for one, and then I think another part is I think they have a role. The government has a role to, at the very least, set some frameworks of what education should be, what should be some like benchmarks, or like what like hey, okay, if, when a kindergarten should be able to do this, third graders should be able to do that. I think that's something that government, the hope through the help with local government and then also educators should be able to formulate those kind of things so that way that the children are progressing in a positive manner and not regressing. I think in addition to that, though, government has a role to help the least of us too. For whether it be people that can't afford education, or children with disabilities, or children where they come from, just situations where it's tough. I think government that's where government can kind of fill the gap.
All right. So if I heard you correctly, you said government has the role of funding. So
Correct.
the Miss Jackson says that the parents are responsible for it, but the government is responsible for giving them the money for it. Is
Correct.
that what I'm hearing so far?
That'd be
All
my
right,
position.
boy, we're really getting ready to go now because, as you can see, we're getting ready to turn this thing around here in a minute. All right, Jeremy, I heard Miss Jackson say that the parents are responsible for it, and I heard Jeremy Smith says, "Hey, the parents should get that money from the government and teach his kids." He's gonna say, "I didn't say it like that. I said this here." That's okay. Jeremy, what should the parent do with that money that Jerome going to give them from the government? And Miss Marcy Jackson says that the parents are responsible for. What are you going to do with that money?
Well, I think at least a portion of the schooling is funded by our tax dollars. So in some ways we are, contributing to the bottom line of the educational system. But I think to your point, right, government has a civic duty to make sure that that all students have a place to learn. Forget where I heard it said, we're not born into equal circumstances, but everybody deserves an equal opportunity. So, yeah, I think that
You on mute there, Jeremy. There we go. Try it again. Don't try to hide from it now. We saw you click off there. Finish that one up because, boy, I can't wait to get to Damati's on this next question.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of that you guys caught, but I was just saying, you know, I forget where I heard it said, we're not born into equal circumstances, but everybody deserves an equal opportunity. And I think the government.
I think Jeremy likes to jump off on that part there. He don't want to finish that part up. He keep going on mute, but that's okay. We got your point there. So listen, Miss Jackson said the parents are responsible. Jeremy, Mr. Jerome said government should give their parents some money to do that. And I heard Jeremy says, hey, listen, everybody ain't born on equal grounds or equal footing, but they all deserve an equal chance. All right. Miss D, we're going to put it back on you again. Now this question is getting more difficult by the moment here. Here we go. Now the audience is really tuning in. And so, Damaris, I want you to sum up what Miss Jackson, Jeremy, and Jerome said with all this money and who's responsible for all this thing here, because you are a bright graduate psychiatrist person with a master's degree in psychology. So we want to hear what you had to say. Sum up what they just said with this money that Jerome's going to give everybody. Miss Marcy Jackson says that the parents are responsible, and Jeremy said everybody's not equal, but they all deserve an equal chance. Sum that up in your words.
Well, this is going to be very, very expensive for the government. Bottom line, because if we're going to, the parent, yes, I do agree the parent is the first teacher, will always be the first teacher because you're going to get that first one-on-one observation of your child and how they learn. Government does needs to provide more funds for the schools, teachers, students, and all the different services that go towards the IEPs and 504s. And like Jeremy said, we're not all born in the same equal circumstances, but we all deserve an equal chance to rise up. It's just going to be very expensive because you have to if you're accommodating everybody. There's so many services, so many professional school psychologists, because I know that school psychologists here in my district, we might have one or two for the whole district that travel to the different campuses. So I know that is very stressful for them. So yeah, that's bottom line is going to be expensive.
Sounds like a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about education. We can't seem to settle it all down. I heard Miss Jackson say, Mama and Daddy's responsible for that kid. I heard Jerome said, United States or whatever government it is, give them some money to the parents. I wonder what you would do with all that money that they're going to give you. Let's say we give for each student on an average of about $30,000 to $40,000, depending on the average, to teach a kid a year. What would you do with that money? I heard Jeremy say, we're not all equal, but we all deserve an equal opportunity. And I heard Damari said it's going to be real expensive. When it came out of it, it's really expensive. So now, Miss Jackson, we're going to step it up on you a little bit now. All right. So we heard what Damari says. We heard what Jerome said. I heard what you said. I heard what Jeremy said, that we're not all born equal, but we should deserve an equal opportunity. Answer this question for me. We're talking about education now. In the United States, we're almost rid measles, the mumps, and all of that, right? Through education sources, right? It was pretty much done away with in the United States, using all that education that we have. Yet, in 2026, we have more cases in 1 year than what we've had in 50 years. What part does education play in teaching our public about health?
So the interesting thing about education is it's not this isolated silo thing, right? Education is is a part. It's everywhere. It's in everything. Every division, every department, everywhere, everything needs education. So when it's I think someone mentioned it about being perceived as sort of linear. Yeah, there is this continuum, this pathway, pre-K on up to, but there's so much going on with education across each of those along each of those points. I mean, you go to the recreation center, there's education there, there's instructions on how to use the equipment, how to develop an exercise plan. My children are athletes. I have a son who plays basketball for his high school team, a daughter who plays flag football for her high school team. I mean, there are instructions embedded in rules and how to play games. So education it needs to stop being this. It can only be done if you go to XYZ school and if you only are in here. So if you make education what it is, which is about learning, like the frameworks, excellent. I love frameworks. If you make it about what it is that needs to be learned, what are the objectives in order to be able to engage in this experience, to benefit from good health, for example. What is it that I need to learn? I need to know how to wash my hands. Where do you learn that? I need to learn how to eat well. Where do you learn that? What are the resources and tools that can be wrapped around at an appropriate developmental level to teach these things? And it's not
Ms.
just,
Jackson,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me ask you
yeah,
again.
yeah.
We talked about healthcare a little bit here. I said over the last 50 years, we've pretty much done away with measles and mumps in this country.
Mm-hmm,
And the question was, if we educated our folks and we know that we got rid of it almost there,
mm-hmm.
what is the purpose of education with health in 2026? We have more than 500 cases now of measles and mumps in this country that we got rid of for over 50 years, and now we're back. What happened? That's the part I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I can't answer what happened with measles and mumps and why the vaccination is there. And I'm not going to put it on the plate that is education's responsibility. I mean, society is made up of a complex interrelationship between various divisions and many departments and people. I mean, you have systems of sewage, you have systems of healthcare that have ineffective processes when it comes to educating physicians. I mean, you have so much miscommunication about what causes diseases, what the effectiveness of vaccinations, the ineffectiveness of vaccination. I
Mhm.
mean, that you can't put that all on an education um, um, doorstep. So
Okay. Thank you, Miss
I don't know
Jackson.
how to, yeah.
Thank you. We don't know how to answer that one. All right, I got you. Like I said, it's not going to get any easier. We're just a little bit over halfway through, so we're going to step it up even more. I love that answer, by the way, because it says first you told me education is in everything that we do, and then you said on here, wow, how do we answer these things here? And I get it. That's what education is all about. That's what the purpose is, and so we're going to even step it up more. Jerome,
Yeah.
why would some states in the United States want to teach history, which is education, by the way,
Mhm.
and some states would not want to teach history?
I think part of it because we can't agree on certain facts, or some inconvenient truths that went through in our history, which, like you said, is education. I think that's a big part of why some states are want to teach things, and some states don't want to teach things. I think big thing is we take less policy out of education and make it more applicable. Of hey, these are the set of facts that happen. Nobody disputes that the our Independence Day is July 4th, correct? But yet there's different ways we understand independence in this country and what it means to be free in this country. So I think if we could get to the point where we understand what the established facts are, that I think the thing I'm kind of eating or biting around is like there was slavery, that there was slavery, that there, that because of slavery, there's things that my ancestors and people that I'm around or look like me, we struggle with on a day-to-day basis that our counterparts do not struggle with. So I think it's one of those, if we ever got to the point where we took less policy or even just understood the set of facts that that happened and that it did happen and that there are ramifications because of that, and not have to worry about the guilt or take the guilt out of it and just understand that, hey, it happened, let's move forward, and then let's move forward in a way that's equitable for everybody.
All right. Thank you, Jerome. Great answer, by the way. And we're going to come back to that. And like I said, we're just a little bit over halfway through. The questions are going to get a little bit more up on it. So, Jeremy, let's step it up a little bit more. We just heard what Jerome had to say about education. All right. So, should there be a division in education when it comes to the races in this country?
You're speaking about segregation?
Yes, sir.
I don't think segregation is necessary. I don't think it's necessary. I do think that, as I said before, I'm not an expert in politics or health or anything like that, but it does beg the question. You think we're taxed on our income, we're taxed when we go to the store, taxed for just about everything. Where is the money going, right? that we pay into taxes. I'm not an expert, so I wouldn't give like an expert opinion on that, but it does beg a lot of questions.
It does beg a lot of questions, and so I ask you that, and like I said, you're going to get it when I come back to the end of this, because it's going to bring us all together about the purpose of education. What's the purpose of education? We're going to lead back to that, and so I understand that. But so let's move this on to Miss D. You're getting all the hard questions here again. We're gonna go backwards again here and make sure that some of these other guys get it too. So we just heard what Jeremy said, and I asked about, should there be any segregation as far as education? Is it fair that someone makes $1 million a year and they pay a lot of money for taxes and pay for the education, and then you have someone who makes maybe $25,000 a year, but they get the same education? Is that equal? And should it be?
You're saying, so if you make $1 million and you pay towards your education, versus someone who has makes 25,000, and they're able to, like, based on like a lottery type.
Yeah. Well, I say it this way. So I remember Jeremy said, we're not all born equal, but we all deserve equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. Right. And so a parent that went to school, they did everything they had to do, they made this money, and they're paying, let's say, $100,000 a year in taxes, and the person that makes $25,000 and paying $250 a year in taxes for his education. Should it be fair for those persons to get the same education rights?
I think yes, just because I believe that education, no matter what type of education it is, needs to be accessible to everybody. It's, in my eyes, it's unfortunate that you have to pay a lot of money to receive like a certain tier of education, and if you don't have that a lot of money, then you only get a little a subpar. So I think it is fair. I don't think it's necessary to have to pay for education. I think it's just the system that society put in place. So it's like a baseline. We have the library that has many books to learn from, and the world at your disposal. So not disposal, but the world is open to get that education as well. So not necessary is my answer.
Okay, good. And like I said, this is just a discussion, guys. And so people ask these questions to me, and I'm just pushing it out to you guys so you have an opportunity to learn, because someone say, well, I worked really hard and I did all these things and I want to pay extra and I want my kids to go to these schools here, and so they deserve to go to that school there. And this other person, I'm sorry that they didn't have all these opportunities, but should that hold my kid back from what they're doing as well? Should it all be equal? So Jerome, I'm going to come back to you. All that being said, now, the first question was, I said, is what the purpose of education? I'm going to ask that question again. Since we had just this little bit of conversation, what is the purpose of education again now?
I feel the same way as I said before. It's learning the skill sets to take a person from childhood to adulthood, so that way they can survive in the world. No matter what their socioeconomic status is.
All right. All right. So he hasn't changed any. He said it's about survival, basically. Is that correct, Jerome? When it comes down to it, it's about survival. I
Correct.
happen to
Correct.
agree with that, by the way. It is survival. All right, Miss Jackson, I see you chomping to get in there. So this is a great, great one for you. Miss Jackson, in an ideal world, how should education look like? In an ideal world, what should education look like?
So, so once we have an agreement and understanding what it is that why we're trying to raise this independent person and into what the end is supposed to kind of look like, what the community is that this child is going to become a part of in this society. It looks like a complex, compassionate system of compassionate educators and stakeholders who are intentional around the individual needs and providing inputs along the continuum, along with adjustments. You can call those adjustments remediation. You could call it special education. You can call it enrichment. But those adjustments need to happen along that continuum at the designated points that might be milestones that might be fixed, but also responsive to what we see. Being able to read and respond to those individual needs and be able to be responsive and not restricted to say, well, we can't do that until, and that's one of the beauties of having an education framework that has the flexibility to be able to provide those guide rails, if you will, but also having the space and room to be resourceful enough to bring out of that child what it is that's already in there. You're not doing anything fascinating. You didn't put into this child something, it's all we're doing is curating what exists and refining it. And so if when we take that off, we don't have to get the big head, right? That oh, there's this massive role. You just have to be intentional and caring about this individual person that's now placed in your care to provide learning systems and frameworks for.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Jackson. All right, Jeremy. Uh, we got a few minutes left here, and then I'm going to go in just to a general topic where you all have an opportunity to jump in here in a moment here. Just over 3/4 way through here, almost there. Thank you guys for out there holding out and listening to us online. We really do appreciate it. And by the way, you'll be able to hear this over and over again. We are recording this, so you'll be able to hear what we have said as well. Pass it on to your friends and family members so that they can also jump in and hear a little bit about what we have to say. Jeremy, I want to ask this question to you. How does a government, and I don't mean just the United States government, but any government, survive without education? I'm sorry, with education. How do the government survive? How do we survive as a country with education?
It's a complex question with a lot of different layers. At the core of the solution, I would have to imagine it would have to be embracing, as I said, our diversity. We are not a monolith, especially here in America. We have so many different types of people and different cultures, races, ethnicities. We have to create a system that is inclusive. I believe that the second point I made about what the role I think education plays is creating independent thinkers. Because we aren't a monolith, everybody doesn't think the same way, and diversity is so important. We want to promote independent thinking to some degree because that's where innovation comes in. this country was quote unquote great, as people say, this is when things were being invented. This is when innovation was at the forefront. And I think that the future of this country, we have to get back to that to some degree, right? We want to promote innovation. We want to promote some level of independent thinking, strategy, creation of new things. And that's I think is when we're in that ethos, or we're promoting that type of culture in the country, I think that we're in a good place.
Okay, thank you. All right, Demaris, you're going to have the last question before we go into our group discussion, and we're going to make this one not too hard on you. I've given you a lot of hard questions there, but here's one that's for you. Education is important because what?
Education is important because without it, potential is left by the side. I believe that God created us with a purpose and to live out that purpose, to do his will. So if that's not cultivated and the seeds are not planted with education, then that gift is a waste. So education is meant to help that seed grow, and to provide so that seed grow into a person who is able to think for themselves and the Lord as well, and make sure that they are contributing to the society that they are living in. And I think that's my main answer.
All right, great. So listen, guys, as you can see, when I first started off, again, I'm going to say this one more time, is I said, what's the purpose of education? And you guys all chimed in, and it seemed like we have more different kind of opinions of what's the purpose of education. Everybody has their own opinion of what education is. Now, this is for everybody together, and you can join in at will. I'm going to throw a question out there, and then I'm going to moderate it for a moment, and then I'm going to jump on to the next one because we only have a few minutes left before we leave here. I want to make a few announcements before we leave. But here's one for you. Now, this is the rhetoric question, by the way, rhetoric. And so I want you to chime in on it after I say that. I believe education is important because of survival. Without being educated, you just will not survive. We learn from our history. We learn from the past. And I believe that when you're educating yourselves or your family or your members, that you make things greater and you learn not to make those mistakes again. I also believe, this is me saying, that it is the parents' responsibility to make sure that their students are educated. However, Jeremy said it quite frankly, some of us are not born with all the access to everything that many other folks are, and some are less for that. But that doesn't mean that you're not as educated, because education, as Miss Jackson said, it includes everything. It's inclusive. And Jerome said, hey, education is everything in survival. So we agree on that. Now, if we agree that education is survival, where should we start off first? And anybody can jump in. Don't all jump in at once, though.
I'll jump on. I think faith-based education is critical, and it's a foundation for the compass of what it is and how deep you will learn and how far you will go. That's
When you say faith-based, Miss Jackson, are you
meaning the Messiah said it the best, right? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, right? Truth is about education. The gentleman said about
let me ask you a
facts,
question.
right?
Now I'm going to
So
jump
let
in.
me just clarify. So
I gotta jump in. I gotta jump in though, Miss Jackson. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's important because everybody don't believe in God.
Listen,
and so that's
you
that's
may not believe that 2 + 2 is 4. You may not believe that it is 3 feet of snow outside. There's a lot you may not believe, but that doesn't make it not true. So the bottom line is it is evidence proven that this country, this education system was founded on moral principles, Franklin and all of them. When you look at early education history, I explain it in my book, Pour the Water. When you look at how the curriculum was founded, it was based on a biblical education. Now,
Now let me ask this
again, you
question.
don't have to follow that, but the point I'm making is the reason why that was chosen was because of these principles and values and what would be called morality, right? Kindness, not stealing, being respectful. I mean, you can call it what you want to call it. The bottom line is, where did all of that come from when you dial that back all the way down in history? You can call
Great,
it
Miss
what you want.
Jackson.
So
Miss
that's
Jackson,
what I want to say.
I greatly appreciate it. But we got to get everybody in here. And so I understand that. But we got to remember that we are a country of many different people. And we
So
talk about
that's
education.
why I
Hold
said
on.
faith, right? So
Yep.
there has to be, where does education start for survival? It has to start with a moral compass, a compass around proper and collaborative and what would be called a moral code, that we
All
won't do this. We will do
right.
that.
Miss Jackson, I got it. I got it. That's great. But I got to get some of these other folks in too. And I got to hear their opinion because everybody and I agree with it. And that's what I say about education. Jerome, what do you say to what Miss Jackson just had to say?
I think she has a great point. There has to be some kind of moral compass as the center of it. Whether you believe in God or not, or any other higher power, or whatever faith there are a shared set of values that everybody believes in. Whether it be respecting your elders, whether it be being nice and being kind to people, or at the very least, doing the random acts of kindness or something. Like, there's usually a shared set of values that everybody can agree upon, and usually are frowned upon if they're not taking part in. And so as a result, I think that's where you start with education. If you like, I talk about a little bit to my friends when I was in elementary school. One of the things that we were taught were called mega skills, and then one of them was like, perseverance, things like being nice, being respectful, active listening, listening with your ears, eyes, your heart, stuff like that. So it was just like, we didn't talk about math, we talked about mega skills. And when we got extra playing time, is because we used our mega skills really well. So it was reinforced. It wasn't one of those things where, hey, you got the math problem right, yeah, we got a piece of gum. But when it came to, hey, you did a really good job of treating Sally right, or helping Sally when she had a lot of stuff in her hands, or you opened the door for the teacher, or you did something really nice that makes society go or help society out. That's what the things that are really reinforced and really were helpful for us. So I would agree
All
with
right.
everything she's saying.
Outstanding. Jeremy, what do you have to say on that?
I think Miss Jackson and Mr. Smith make great points. I tend to agree. I think that there has to be at the center some code of ethics. Second law of energy, the law of entropy, says what? Says everything is energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes forms. If we don't work out, we don't get more in shape, we get less in shape. So things tend to trend closer and closer towards disorder. And that's why systems are so important. That's why codes, laws are so important, right? So I tend to agree. I think that there has to be some code of ethics so that things don't turn into anarchy and complete chaos.
Great. Miss D, you want to chime in on that? And I love this conversation, by the way. Miss Jackson, I didn't want to not let you speak all the other way you want to do it because I know where you're going and I love it. But I got to get these other folks in. All right, Miss D.
I do agree with Miss Jackson, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Watson. There needs to be some sort of collective moral standard for these students, because as I've seen, it is left up to the parents to teach these moral standards, and if the parents themselves are just saying, be nice to your brother, or share, or forcing them to share, or don't do that, that's not really creating that moral standard. It needs to be across the home, the teachers, and everyone needs to agree on something. Otherwise, there's that confusion. The students are looking at the adults. They start to not trust the adults because we have somebody saying this over here, and then a behavior is okay at home, but it's not okay at school. So yeah, there needs to be a baseline.
Wow. So what I'm hearing, and I'm glad I didn't say this at the beginning because we would have never finished up, boy. I see we jumped on something there, which is great. And I told you it would be like this towards the end there. And so I really appreciate. And by the way, I do happen to agree with you guys in that aspect. But I do understand that we are in a country and in a world, in that fact, that they don't believe in a God. Okay? And so we have to take that for what it's worth. However, there's something that we all agree on. Everybody agree that you got to eat to live. Right? You got to breathe to live, right? You need fresh water to live. You need food. You need energy. You need lights and all these other things to live. So those are things that everybody can agree on. You don't have to believe in God to know that it's not right to steal. It's a general thing, right? You should know that, right? But however, in the world that we live in today, anything goes. Okay? And so I'm going to bring it almost to a conclusion here. We got just a few minutes left here. And here's my synopsis of everything. And as Miss Marcy has said already, you don't have to agree. Right? 2 plus 2 is 4. Or 1 plus 1 is 2. But we have those wise guys that say, hey, maybe that 1 has something else inside of it. And so maybe it's 3 instead of 1. Okay, so you got wise guys. Some of you guys will catch that in a minute. Anyway, let me say this to you. In a nation, if you're not on the same purpose, you're not going to be able to go the same direction. So you have to have a direction. In fact, if I would say in our country, and I'm talking about the United States for those folks who may be listening to us from all over the world, and I'm going to use the United States specifically as well. We all have to be in the same direction. Where do we want to go? So when you educate and you say the government is responsible for lending the money, Jerome, to making sure that that happens, and Marcia, you say that the parents are responsible. And the other two agree upon those things there. We all must have a direction. And so there must be a general philosophy on how the country can go. Because divided, you fall, right? And united, you stand. So there must be a directional that we go. Without it, we do not survive. So in a synopsis, I do agree that parents are responsible for teaching the kids. The government has a role because we are one, and our folks need to learn the basic things. For instance, we are all responsible for paying taxes, right? How do you know how to pay taxes? Let somebody be told how to do it, right? We're all responsible for some form or another in securing a country in some form or another. How do you know how to do that unless there's not? So the government has a role in that. But when it comes to basic education, the parents are responsible for that. Yes, Jeremy, it's not always equal. And most things in life are not equal, unfortunately. What should be equal is that equal protection and equal funding or sources under the law. Now, what do I mean by that? If you make $1 million a year and you give $100,000 in taxes, that's 10%. If you make $100,000 a year and you give your $10,000, that's equal. That's 10% because you're giving what's been given to you. So in the United States, we all should be thankful in some forms and kind of concerned in other forms. But as far as the education is concerned, we should be on the same page. We have to be when it comes to certain things. Okay. Whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in this country or not, we're all responsible for our part in doing something. So education, the general philosophies of the government and learning the roles of the government is the government responsibility. General laws and general welfare and being, Miss Marcy, what she said about how to learn and educate a child, you get those basic things at home. And yeah, if you don't get those basic things at home, it's going to be very difficult to live, not only in this country, but anywhere in the world. As Ms. Marcy said before, I lived in Japan, I lived in Guam, and I've been in many other countries. And I can tell you their education system much outdo the United States. In fact, what would you say the educational level is of the United States right now? Most people cannot read at a 9th grade level. You can't be the greatest nation in the world and not have a great education system. Let me say that again. We got 1 minute left. We can't be the greatest nation in the world and have a poor education system. If we don't work together, we're working against each other. I want to thank my panelists again, Miss Damaris Robinson, the beautiful and the courageous Miss Marcy Jackson, the stunning coach man himself from Indiana, and a great team from the Hoosiers there, Mr. Jerome Smith, and the wise and understanding, pontificating Jeremy Watson with the Watson Agency. Man, I could not ask for a better. Thank you so much. Again, folks, I have you listen in to these folks again, and maybe you'll pick up some things. And this is just a teaser. I'm going to invite these folks back again sometimes in the near future to talk about it. I have a lot of things to say to them, and I can see they have a lot of things to say. And we just touched the very edges of what we talked about today. What is the purpose of education? Wow. And we didn't even touch it. Some of you probably saying, I don't know what the purpose still is. Well, the purpose is to make sure what? That's the next question. Until then, see you guys next time around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.